1694 London. King William III sits on his throne. But he has a problem. He's bankrupt. England is at war with France. It's called the 9 Years' War. And it's bleeding the treasury dry. William III has borrowed from every merchant, every banker, every noble in England. And now, no one will lend him another shilling. The king needs £1.2 million, a staggering sum worth over £200 million today. Without it, the army will starve. The navy will be defeated. England will fall. But there's a problem. William doesn't want to raise taxes. The people are already angry. If he taxes them more, there could be a revolt. And then, a mysterious figure appears. A Scottish merchant named William Paterson. He walks the streets of London, hat pulled low, muttering to himself. He has an idea. A radical, dangerous, brilliant idea. What if, instead of taxing the people, the king borrowed from them? And what if, in exchange for that loan, the lenders were allowed to form a bank that could print its own money? The king was desperate. He agreed to the deal. That single agreement created the Bank of England, the first modern central bank. An institution that would, within a century, manage the entire global gold standard. This is the story of how one man, one debt, and one desperate king changed the world forever. Let's go back to 1688. William III, a Dutch prince, had just become King of England. He had overthrown his father-in-law, James II, in the Glorious Revolution. But James II had fled to France. And the French king, Louis XIV, was furious. He was determined to put James back on the throne. In 1689, France declared war on England. The conflict would last 9 brutal years. England's army and navy were struggling. Supplies were low. Morale was worse. The king had already borrowed heavily. He had raided the treasury. He had sold royal lands. But it wasn't enough. By 1694, William had maxed out his credit. The merchants of London refused to lend him more. They said, "We don't trust you to pay us back." The king was trapped. No money. No army. No hope. William turned to Parliament. But the politicians were divided. Some wanted to raise taxes. Others wanted to make peace with France. In a desperate move, the king threw the problem to a committee of Parliament. And that's when a man named William Paterson stepped forward. Paterson was a Scottish merchant. He had traveled across Europe. He had studied banking systems in Amsterdam and Genoa. He had seen how the Dutch financed their wars. And he had a radical idea. Paterson proposed a revolutionary plan. Instead of taxing the people, the government would borrow £1.2 million from the public. And in exchange, the lenders would be given the right to form a bank. But there was a catch. A brilliant catch. The bank would be allowed to print its own banknotes. These notes weren't backed by gold or silver. They were backed by the promise of the government to pay its debt. In other words, the bank could create money out of thin air. It was an astonishing idea. If it worked, the government would never run out of money again. If it failed, the entire economy would collapse. Paterson found 1,268 investors. Together, they raised the £1.2 million. The deal was signed on July 27, 1694. The Bank of England was born. The government paid 8% interest on the loan. That's a high rate by today's standards, but the government was desperate. The investors also paid a management fee to the bank. In return, the bank got the exclusive right to issue banknotes. Here's how it worked. The investors gave their money to the bank. The bank lent it to the government. The government used it to buy weapons, food, and pay soldiers. But, and this is the key, the bank also printed extra banknotes. These notes were used as currency, backed by the government's promise to pay. The 8% interest was guaranteed. The government had to pay it every year, no matter what. And so, the national debt was born. The Bank of England was an immediate success. Within months, the government had its money. The war continued. England survived. But this wasn't just a bailout. It was a revolution in finance. The Bank of England became the government's banker. It managed the national debt. It issued currency. It stabilized the economy. By the early 1800s, the bank was managing the global gold standard. Every major economy in the world measured its currency against the value of gold. And the Bank of England, the world's first modern central bank, was the keeper of the world's gold. Today, the Bank of England is still the central bank of the United Kingdom. It manages the country's money supply, sets interest rates, and regulates the financial system. And it all started with a desperate king and a debt of £1.2 million. The Bank of England's founding created a new kind of banking. Before 1694, governments had to tax or seize wealth. After 1694, they could borrow against future revenue. They could print money to fund wars, build infrastructure, and manage crises. William Paterson didn't just create a bank. He created a system. A system that allowed England to finance its wars, build its empire, and become the most powerful nation on earth. The Bank of England's story is a reminder that sometimes, the most powerful forces in history aren't armies or kings. They are ideas. And one idea, a debt, a promise, and a piece of paper, changed the world. The most powerful bank in the world was built on a royal debt. And that debt changed the world forever.